Hello and welcome. I've got to be honest, this next video is quite hard for me to make. I almost deleted the files and sort of binned it off as a bad idea. Now the video you're about to watch is about long exposure and my process of long exposure, something that new photographers will be able to benefit from, but also experienced photographers that are just looking to sort of recap and sort of understand how other people go through long exposure photography. There was something about the day. I was rushing around trying to make time to actually get out to a location, and this is a location that I've been to a number of times without any issues. So I started packing the gear. I had issues with charging, one of the batteries hadn't charged properly, the other cable trying to go into the charging point didn't work, a memory card had failed on me. There was just lots of little things that were going on that were just annoying me and sort of making me feel a little bit frustrated with the whole process. I arrived at location. There were lots of people around. It was a beautiful summer's evening, real mixed bag of people really. I persevered and carried on to the location, but I couldn't get rid of this enormous sense of unease. I was mixing my words up, I was fluffing the speech, just things weren't going right. You all have them, and I kind of just put it through to the way the day was. And yeah, I persevered and thought, no, this probably isn't going to work. Stick around to the end of the video and I'm going to explain actually what went wrong that day. The video does cut off quite abruptly, there's no outro, so that's the reason why I've done this intro, to sort of explain what actually happens at the end. So yeah, watch to the end, enjoy the video, and yeah, I'll speak to you at the end. Hello and welcome to the channel. Tonight you join me on the banks of the River Mersey. Ideal location really for what I've got in store for tonight, and that's going through long exposure photography. Now long exposure photography is one of those things that everyone sort of tries to master as soon as they start out in photography, and I think it's quite important certainly to understand the settings and what the camera can do. So yeah, join me tonight and we'll see what we can get on a nice long exposure on a lovely summer's evening. So what is long exposure? Well, basically it's slowing down the time in the camera. It's allowing the camera to take a much longer image than it normally would. Now there's a couple of ways we can do this. First of all, wait for night time, which nighttime isn't for a few hours yet, or we can do what they call ND filter. And an ND filter is basically a pair of sunglasses that fit over the front of the lens. And what this does is it allows us to really slow the shutter speed down, and what effect this gives is cloud movement in the sky, but also make water appear more steady than it actually is. Also, when you've got waterfalls, you've got the water rushing down, it can give those sort of white streaks of water coming down. That sort of long exposure effect is what it's called. So tonight I'm going to explain how you get not only long exposures, but also how you get the sharpest and the clearest long exposures possible within the cameras of today. Right, let's go and get set up and see what we can get from here. So long exposure photography is exactly the same as normal photography. You've still got to think about your composition, you've got to think about your focal points, you've got to understand what's going to be in the image or actually what you want in the image. It's no different to any normal photography. So we're going to set up now, and I'll show you really step by step of not only the reasons why, but actually what the effects do, and the ways we can sort of overcome any camera shake or any movement within the images and try and get those crystal clear shots. Right, let's go. way the light or the shadow is going across my eye. Right, okay, so I've set the camera up on the tripod. Now the tripod is a must because it's all about keeping the camera steady whilst we make the shot. Any movement within the camera will cause blur, motion blur as they call it, within the shot. So it's ideal, we need, well, not ideal, we do need a tripod. Always go for quite a sturdy tripod here. I brought the Manfrotto tripod out now. It's a fully metal tripod, bit of a heavy beast, but it doesn't move in any wind conditions at all. I've never had any movement on this this tripod. It's absolutely fantastic. So the sturdier the tripod, the better. Okay, so I've got the camera set up here. I'm just looking at my my composition. So I've got some blades of grass in the foreground, leading onto where the river sort of has a bit of an S-bend. Focus point is going to be the Gateway Bridge, so I'm just going to focus on there now and get the shot set up for what I want, and then I'm going to start adding the filters and then dialing down the settings, which I'll show you a trick on how to do those. So on the front of the camera, you might have noticed I've actually got a polarizing filter on there already. Now that's something that I always keep on my lens. I never really remove it, just because it's the way I shoot, and because I predominantly do landscape photography. Polarizing filter is definite, certainly for lowering the reflections in the water and just bringing a bit more color, a bit more depth to your image. Can't actually believe I did that one-handed. So I put the screw cap on the front, which actually fits the polarizing filter, and then I've got the mount as well on the front of the camera now, which is where you slide the glass in, which is kind of like the sunglasses. So the filter system I use is the Lee filters. I use this because it was the one that was available at the time. I'd done a little bit of research on others, but Lee filters seem to be the ones where there are most common of them, most available, and yeah, that's the reason why. But there's plenty of other brands out there. You know, I'm not partial to Lee. It's just what I use, really. So with long exposure, because you're opening the sensor for a lot longer, it shows any markings of any dust on there. So what can happen quite often as well is you get little dust specks on the image, and that can sometimes mean a dirty sensor, and it seems to be highlighted a lot more when you do long exposures, just purely for the fact that the sensor's open a lot longer. I don't know if you can see those geese there. I thought they were incoming aircraft at one point. Right, so I'm just going to put the filter on the front of the camera, and then we'll move on to the next stage. So I'll put the filter on the front of this. Now, let's go back one stage. When I set the shot up, I focused on the bridge, and then I turned the automatic focus off, because what happens, because the glass is so dark on this filter, it's a 10-stop filter, so you can't see through it really. It's almost like welding glass. So what will happen is if I go into automatic focus, the camera will try and focus on the back of the glass, just purely because it's so dark, and that's where it thinks it's trying to focus. So you'll always get a blurry shot. So just make sure you turn your automatic focus off. Now another trick as well is if you've got stabilization on your lens. This one hasn't, but if you've got stabilization on your lens, turn that off as well, because when the camera's on the tripod and you've got stabilization on, it can confuse the system and it just give a little bit more blur. So if you've got stabilization, turn it off. So now we need to work out what exposure we're going to use. Now before I put the filter on the camera, it was showing a 30th of a second. Now if I get the app out for the Lee Filters app, it shows, so a 30th of a second is actually a 30-second exposure, which will be ideal. Now if you use the camera on the top of the exposure bar, what it will show is, when you put the filter on, it will read completely out. It may show a 2-second exposure, which will be way too dark. So the best way to do it is actually using the app, and that gives you quite an accurate reading of what the exposure should be. Right, on to the next step. So here I have an intervalometer. Now this one here, so this is the receiver, which goes into the camera, and then this is remote control. This is the best way that I use it, but you can just use this directly into the camera. What we're after is minimal movement again in the camera. So this just fits on top. It's controlled by this. I press a button, it will take the image. So I need a 30-second exposure. So we'll get the settings dialed in for this. So as I said before, the camera sensor on it just gets really confused with anything like this. So it's, don't know if you can see that, but it's showing 2 seconds at f8. It's not. 30-second exposure is what we need to be doing. So that just shows how confused it actually is. So we're dialing in now, 30 seconds exposure at f8, and we're almost ready to take the shot. There's just one more thing we need to do. Now at the back of the camera here, you've got your view piece. Now we need to block that off. We don't want any light going into the camera, purely for the fact is it can affect the colour. It gives sort of light leaks through the back of the camera onto the back of the sensor, and it can give, when I first started doing this, I didn't have a proper cap that went over it, and little blue streaks were coming through on the image, probably about an inch wide on the image, which just destroyed it. There's nothing I could do. Even in Photoshop there was nothing I could do with it. So yeah, just make sure that that's blocked. Now the D810 has the sort of an inside shutter that blocks any light. Other cameras have clips that clip over the top of them, or if you haven't got that, just simply a rag or a cloth, something that's going to block the light from going in through in through the back and hitting that sensor. Okay, so I'm all set up. The camera's ready. It's as sturdy as it can be. The viewfinder's blocked off. The filter's in place. That's secure. The polarizing filter's on. The settings are all in. I've got my intervalometer here. We'll take the image. Okay, so hopefully that's turned out okay for you. If it has, I'll put it on now. If not, this will be quite a short vlog and be quite embarrassing. So what this image shows is just the difference between the water and the sharpness of the bridge. As you can see, the bridge is very sharp, everything stayed crystal clear on it, and yet the water is flowing through the image quite rapidly by the looks of it. And it just gives that unique feel, and that's one of the reasons why we do long exposure. The only issue with tonight is obviously there's very little movement in the sky. The clouds have actually started to disperse away as well. Ideally what you want is fast moving clouds. So on a windy day or a bit of a stormy day, or when you've got fast moving water, that's where the elements of long exposure really come into their own. You can really get some unique shots from it. Hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight on what to do in long exposure, really, long exposure photography. The key is just to make sure that everything is locked down as much as it can be. If you're on a beach, a trick is to put CDs on the feet just so the tripod doesn't sink. Yeah, any sort of little tricks you've got just to make sure that tripod stays still. Another one as well, people tend to hang their bags on the bottom there as well, just to give it a bit more weight. I don't do that because one reason is if it's a windy day, the bags tend to start moving as well, so and that will in turn rock the tripod. So yeah, I tend to leave it as way it is, but the trick is a firm, solid tripod is a must. So I've just set up for the next shot now, and what this telling me now is it's a 20-second exposure. Now what that means is that's without the filter on the front. So when we put the filter on the front, we now need to do a 50-second exposure. Now the issue we've got with this is the camera, or in a majority of manufacturers, only give a 30-second long exposure as a maximum within their settings. So with the intervalometer, we can go as long as we like. So we're going to do a 50-second exposure Now there's a couple of ways we can do this, but I'm going to dial it in on the timer. So what we need to do is, on your camera will, generally most DSLRs will have what they call bulb mode. So flick it onto bulb mode. After 30 seconds on the Nikon, you turn it one more stop and it just goes straight onto bulb. It's as simple as that. What I now need to do with the intervalometer is change that to bulb as well to match it. And quite simply, press it, and then the timer will count down for 50 seconds. We could set the timer for 50 seconds on this, but I'm just going to keep my eye on it and sort of do it freehand. Yeah, the risks we live. So similar to the previous image, you've got the sharpness of the apartments in the background, but then you've also got the fast flowing water through the image. Now because this was a 50-second exposure, the water now appears to be even smoother. The longer the exposure, the smoother the water will be. So unfortunately tonight there's very little amount of cloud movement in the sky. Ideally it would have been great if there's a little bit of wind, a little bit of movement within the sky of the clouds going by. I can sort of show you what it would look like. However, I have taken a number of long exposure images in the past, and I'll show a few now just so you can get a little bit of a taste of what can be achieved. So I'm just going to move around now to another part of the this sort of island, just around the back side of it really, just to get another shot of the bridge, get a little bit lower down by the water. And there's a bit of a shipwreck. I think it's about 100 years old, this shipwreck, so it's just, you know, jaggedy, pointy bits of wood sticking out the water. Right, let's move on around there now. Just so I'm standing here doing these photographs, the water is changing so much with the current. It's really quite scary how powerful it is. You'll be all nice and calm 1 second, then all of a sudden there'll be a big swirl and it all come rushing through at the same time. Yeah, quite eerie. So as the sun's starting to set over in the background, still no cloud cover. We've got one solitary cloud just moving up across the background there. But yeah, as the sun's starting to set now, we've gone from sort of 30 seconds to 40 seconds to now 1:20 with the 10-stop filter on the front. So the image is just over that side there. So you can see that once the light starts to drop, as any type of photography, exposure time needs to increase to compensate for that. So we're, like I said, we're on 1:30 now for these exposures. I don't think it'll be long now until we can actually take the filter off the front. The only issue we've got is obviously the lack of cloud cover in the sky. I was hoping for quite a bit more just over in the distance, but yeah, not to be. You know, we can never have it all the time, can we? So I'm just going to continue taking a few more shots around here. It won't be long till I can take the filter off the front of the camera and then start going into long exposures without that on the front. It just makes it a little bit easier. Focusing is certainly a lot easier. After me preaching to you on the stages about 3 or 4 times, I've gone to use the camera and forgot to turn it off auto. So thank you for watching to the end. Now that video does finish quite abruptly and there isn't an outro, and the reason for that is because the clouds have started to come over. There was quite a lot of colour in the sky, and my original plan was to move back to where I had started the beginning of the vlog. As I started to move towards that location, I noticed there were probably about 7 or 8 gangs of around about 20 teenagers in each of the gangs starting to mill closer together. And I thought, well, maybe they're there for a party, maybe they're going to have a few drinks and, you know, do what teenagers do. No, they started fighting, and this fight was more like a riot. There was a lad in front of me on a bike who got attacked by about 4 or 5 people. Another guy got thrown into the canal. There were people lying unconscious. It was just horrendous. There is video footage of that, but I've decided not to post that on in any way. I don't think it's appropriate. So the reason why I've decided to post this video out is 2 reasons. First of all is because the footage wasn't that bad, and hopefully you can take something away from the tutorial. But also, just a bit of a message for you guys. As video makers, photographers, content creators, artists, whatever you want to call yourselves, we get so wrapped up in what we're actually doing, trying to get the best video footage, trying to get the best photography, just trying to make everything work and come together, that we get a little bit engrossed in ourselves, and we don't understand actually what's happening on the wider spectrum. So many times there's been things happening in the background you're not even aware of. And this can be anything from the tide coming in and getting cut off, fast flowing water. I mean, let's face it, we put ourselves in some fairly dangerous situations that we do need full concentration on. This experience I had the other night was quite unique. I've never witnessed it there before. I've never witnessed anything quite as big. Obviously I've seen fights in the past, but certainly not whilst I've been out in a park trying to do a vlog. So if you can take anything away from this, just be mindful of your surroundings. I'm not trying to put anybody off. I'm not trying to, say photography is dangerous or anything like that. It's just stay safe. Be mindful of actually what's around. And every now and again, just take a couple of minutes just to see what's going on, and just make sure that you're safe to continue. Right, that was a bit of a harsh message. Hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next video, don't forget to like, subscribe, do whatever you need to do. I don't want, the hands are just moving. Yeah, like, subscribe, do what you need to do. More content to come. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching to the end, and see you again real soon. Take care now. Bye bye.